Omid, thank you so much for doing this. I know you are right in the middle of writing your own book. We'll talk about Spare later on, but thank you for doing this. What's your book about? What's the sort of writing it process been like? I'd love to hear a bit about that.
Well, firstly, thank you for taking me in full writing mode, which is basically putting as little effort into my appearance as possible for the foreseeable future. It's tough. I'm writing a book on a story that is constantly moving. Endgame, which is the title of the book, started its life in the Elizabethan era. Now we're in the Carolean era, and we've just a few days off the back of the release of Spare. We had a Netflix series last month. So there is a lot going on. And this is a book that focuses on the future of the royal family, but of course, the crises that they've dealt with in recent years, and also how that affects that future. I think that since the death of the Queen, people are more comfortable having conversations about the relevancy and suitability of the royal family and whether they actually still reflect modern day values and ethics. So this book isn't denouncing or claiming that there's some kind of end on the horizon. It's simply saying we've reached a pinnacle moment where they can either learn and reflect and move forward in a really positive direction that will absolutely allow them to bring the most value to this country and be relevant as possible, or end up slowly fading into sort of slow insignificance.
Yeah, I know it's the done thing to be like, a lot's happened in the past few years, but it has, because when we first met, Harry and Meghan, the couple, also had a very different relationship with the royal family. I remember when we met, it was after a conversation I had, which was about, I guess, race. Well, it was after George Floyd died, the kind of global outcry, and questioning the UK's relationship to racism, what needs to change in the UK. And then they were still working members of the royal family, pretty much super high in opinion polls. Everybody loved them. And 3 years on, or however many years it's been, it's a totally different circumstance. So I definitely understand that things happening super quickly. One of the major things that seems to be part of the change and how people are seeing them and the UK's perspective is this Netflix documentary. And I'm interested to know what your take is, because if you look at popular culture, you look at the media, I can almost crystallize different segments what their take is. But as someone who reports on them, who watches them, how do you see it?
Yeah, it's interesting. Firstly, I remember the conversation that you had with the Sussexes, and it was a real sort of milestone moment for them, I think, because they were sort of newly settling into their lives overseas. And it was one of the first times that we really got to hear them speak quite openly and candidly about a conversation that is usually very uncomfortable for members of the royal family. And that is the history of colonialism and slavery that sits at the heart of the royal establishment and feeds into the sort of systemic and institutional racism that surrounds us in the UK. And I revisited that conversation recently as I sat down to focus on chapters talking about race and the royal family. And I think that was one thing that the Netflix series did really well, which was sort of diving back into those themes in a way that felt well researched and balanced. But of course, at the same time, there were many people that saw elements of that show that felt that it was biased, that it only represented their side of the story. I guess my argument would be, haven't we heard everyone else's side up until that point? So many people have tried to tell Harry and Meghan's story or versions of it or get as close to their truth as possible. I'm one of them. I wrote a biography on Harry and Meghan, Finding Freedom, in 2020, and that dived into a lot of the things that led to their
A great book.
And
A great book.
oh, thank you so much. But it's, I think, for Harry and Meghan, the one thing that they hadn't actually experienced yet was, other than the Oprah interview, was sitting down and reflecting on everything that's happened in recent years and being able to share where they're at with it. And I think that was really important for it to happen. It exists in the kind of ecosystem of Harry and Meghan content that surrounds us, that includes the tabloids, that includes the palace sources that regularly speak on behalf of members of the royal family to tell their side of the story. So I think for them, and it's the same with Harry's book Spare. You know, I can understand why there was that need to actually put their voices on the historical record.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember someone telling me as well that, well, hold on, yes, we're having this debate and we're talking about them now, but at some stage, their children are going to grow up and wonder, where was your side, Dad? Where was your side, Mum? Where was your perspective? And so it's even something that future-proofs the records to ensure that. I mean, take case in point, The Crown. Like you watch The Crown, and for a lot of people, when The Crown's doing for a lot of people, they get what they think about the royal family from The Crown, and of course, folks making The Crown had to do research and pull from as much as possible to recreate the past almost. And a part of me wonders who gets to decide what their history is. If it's the mainstream media, you can almost guarantee what you're going to hear is very negative, very sort of unfavorable. And so, as you're right, they're putting their perspective forward. On perspective, though, Omid, there's a criticism you often get, right, or you've had in the past, which is that, well, are you too close to the couple in that, can you really report fairly on a couple you may be quote unquote close to? What do you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's something I hear almost on a daily basis. Anytime I publish anything, it's one of the first comments that will start to appear, and the press are equally vocal on that. Listen, I think that firstly, there's a large misunderstanding that I'm a friend of the couple. I've had great relationships with the teams around them over the years, and that's certainly given me great access a number of different times in their sort of lives and royal careers. But I don't know them in a sort of friends capacity. And I've wanted to maintain that distance because it allows me to report on the story as an insider without being too sort of deep in the trenches. I think for me, I've always looked at the landscape of royal coverage. What are 95% of the other royal correspondents doing? For many, they are repeating the palace narrative. They are repeating palace sources or sources close to other members of the royal family. And I think that for the accurate information, there is a space for that. There is a need for that. But at the same time, there isn't anyone that has really focused on trying to get the side that pertains to Harry and Meghan. And that's what I've always wanted to try and do, because I feel like then we have the complete picture. But of course, the criticism that comes with that is that I only care about their side, which actually, if you ever read any of my stuff, I always make sure to include the palace side as well. But I think that it just helps that tabloid narrative that if there is someone out there that is trying to simply be fair in the treatment of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, that is almost impossible that could be seen as legitimate reporting, and that it instead has to be a fan or a friend or a cheerleader, because otherwise, to give that credibility would mean that what they're saying is true. And then that threatens the narrative that's often in the tabloids that have created these caricatures that are so far from the reality. It doesn't suit the business model.
Yeah, I mean, if there was ever anything, as you're saying that, I just realized that if there's ever any issue, any topic, any popular culture kind of debate that shows you the dangers of echo chambers, it must be commentary on the couple. Because if I listen to a certain news channel, which I won't name, on a daily basis, there's an evening panel who all take it in turns to say how terrible these two people are. They've ruined the royal family, over and over and over again. And you just wonder, as you said, if you're a journalist, surely there would be some sort of curiosity in you, intellectual curiosity, call it, to find out other sides. And I just feel like a lot of journalists have just abandoned that and just kind of thought, okay, I support them, I don't support them. How do I just regurgitate these lines over and over and over again? One line that I've heard, which really grinds my gears, is this notion that, Meghan somehow is to blame for Harry's book. And somehow this is all some scheme, some ploy from the beginning of time to slowly get this, by the way, fully grown adult male to somehow, ditch his family. You must have heard that. What's your response to those sort of criticisms that this is all Meghan's doing, sort of pulling the strings, and that.
I mean, it's it's bizarre because I think the image that is often portrayed is that Meghan is a sort of witch-like character that has cast a spell over Harry, and he is unable to make a decision for himself. He is unable to think straight. He is unable to treat his relationship with his family in the way that he wants, or tell his own story without her involvement. And actually, it couldn't be further from the truth. And I think that's something that
Ever heard of a book that drops like a bombshell in the royal universe? That's exactly what Omid Scobie's Spare did. It's like a boomerang of truth spinning right back into the heart of the British monarchy's carefully curated narrative. Scobie, not just another royal commentator, but a journalist who's been closely observing the Sussex saga, decided to pull back the curtain on the royal family's intricate dynamics. His book wasn't just a tell-all, it was a strategic exposé that challenged the traditional royal rota's stranglehold on royal storytelling. With surgical precision, he unpacked the invisible contract between the royals and British media, revealing how manipulation, racism, and systemic bias have long controlled the royal narrative. Harry and Meghan weren't just telling their story. They were dismantling an entire media ecosystem that had repeatedly misrepresented and marginalized them. Scobie's reporting went beyond gossip. It was a powerful critique of an institution struggling to modernize, highlighting the deep-rooted challenges of race, privilege, and media manipulation within the British royal establishment. Karma, media, and the royal narrative, Omid Scobie's insider view. Ever thrown a boomerang into the world of royal reporting? Well, Omid Scobie's done exactly that. He's not just another royal correspondent. He's a storyteller who's peeled back the glossy layers of the British royal family's media landscape. Scobie, known for his deep-dive books about Prince Harry and Meghan, has consistently argued that the royal family's relationship with traditional British media is fundamentally broken. It's like a rigged game where the rules are set by an outdated royal rota system that thrives on sensationalism and control. When Scobie talks about dismantling this invisible contract between the royals and press, he's not just making noise. He's challenging an entire institutional mechanism that has long dictated how royal stories get told. Imagine a media ecosystem where royals could actually control their own narrative, free from the predatory lens of tabloid journalists who've turned personal stories into cheap entertainment. That's the revolution Scobie's suggesting, a radical reimagining of how royal coverage could and should work in the 21st century. The Royal Rota, a media merry-go-round of manipulation. Ever heard of the Royal Rota? Buckle up, because this isn't just some boring media protocol, it's a full-blown circus of control and narrative manipulation that would make your head spin faster than a boomerang. Imagine a system where a select few media outlets get exclusive backstage passes to the royal family's world, like some weird VIP club where they get to decide who sees what and how. It's almost like these outlets have been handed a magical megaphone that lets them shape public perception with zero accountability. Omid Scobie isn't just pointing out this systemic nonsense, he's calling for its complete demolition. The Royal Rota isn't journalism, it's more like a carefully choreographed dance where the media leads and the royals are forced to follow, spinning a story that suits their agenda. And just like karma has a way of coming back around, Scobie believes this toxic system is about to get a serious reality check. Unraveling the royal media machine, Scobie's bold critique. Ever thrown a boomerang into the complex world of royal media relations? The invisible contract is kind of like that, a mystifying, unwritten agreement that's been spinning through the British royal landscape for decades, creating a mesmerizing yet destructive dance between the monarchy and the press. Omid Scobie, with the precision of a digital age investigative journalist, isn't just pointing out this phenomenon, he's calling for its complete dismantling. This unspoken pact has long allowed media outlets unprecedented, almost intrusive access to the royal family, transforming their lives into a perpetual public spectacle, where personal boundaries blur and privacy becomes a forgotten luxury. By advocating for the termination of the Royal Rota and this invisible contract, Scobie is essentially challenging a systemic practice that has controlled, manipulated, and often brutalized royal narratives. particularly those of outsiders like Meghan Markle, who didn't fit the traditional royal mold. It's a bold stance that suggests the royals deserve more than just managed media exposure. They deserve genuine human respect. Karma, crowns, and the media's cruel game. Ever thrown a boomerang of truth into a media landscape thick with prejudice? The British press operates like a rigged carnival game, where the targets are always Prince Harry and Meghan, and the rules are written by an invisible hand of bias. You know the type. Always ready to twist a narrative faster than you can say unfair coverage. It's like they've got a personal vendetta, spinning stories that paint the Sussexes as villains in a drama they never signed up for. The media's influence isn't just reporting, it's a full-blown character assassination machine. Spinning negativity with such precision, you'd think they'd invented a new art form of public manipulation. Scobie knows this game all too well. He's calling out the royal Rota's toxic dance, a system so entrenched it makes boomerangs look predictable. The constant barrage of negativity isn't journalism, it's a calculated attempt to control the narrative. And here's the kicker. What goes around comes around, and the media might just find its own karma boomeranging back in spectacular fashion. Unraveling the royal drama Harry, Meghan, and the media storm. Ever thrown a boomerang of public scrutiny? Prince Harry and Meghan Markle have been catapulted into a relentless media cyclone that would make even the most resilient souls wobble. It's like they've been handed a never-ending roller coaster ticket. Except this ride is brutally personal. The British media's microscope hasn't just examined their lives, it's dissected every breath, every gesture, every potential misstep with a surgical precision that borders on cruel. Imagine waking up daily knowing that your every move might be twisted, weaponized, transformed into a headline designed to provoke and punish. Scobie suggests, and rightfully so, that the royal institution hasn't just been passive, but complicit in this emotional warfare. The invisible contract between the monarchy and media has created a toxic ecosystem where Harry and Meghan are perpetual targets, their mental health seemingly an afterthought in this grand spectacle of royal drama. And let's be real, no amount of royal training prepares you for this level of sustained, calculated public evisceration. It's not just criticism, it's a systematic erosion of personal boundaries that would make anyone question their sanity. The royal rebellion rewriting the media narrative. Ever thrown a boomerang through the royal media landscape? That's exactly what Omid Scobie is doing, and it's a fascinating spectacle. Just like our previous karma discussion, this is about flipping the script and challenging long-established power dynamics. Scobie isn't just suggesting a minor adjustment, he's calling for a fundamental revolution in how the royal family interacts with the press. Imagine a world where the royals aren't passive targets of relentless media scrutiny, but active architects of their own story. He's essentially proposing to dismantle the royal Rota, that invisible contract that's been suffocating royal narratives for generations. By advocating for reduced media access and more controlled storytelling, Scobie is proposing something radical, that the royals should reclaim their power, their dignity, and most importantly, their right to define themselves. It's not just about protection, it's about transformation. And much like a boomerang, this bold stance has the potential to return with incredible force, potentially reshaping how we understand royal communication forever. Royal rumblings, the media's monarchy makeover. Ever thrown a boomerang into the royal family's delicate ecosystem? The British media's relentless pursuit has done just that, spinning wild narratives that slice through palace walls with razor-sharp precision. Just like our earlier discussion about karma and online negativity, the royal family is experiencing its own turbulent boomerang effect. The constant media scrutiny has created a toxic environment that's eroding public trust faster than you can say tabloid drama. Omid Scobie's revelations aren't just gossip, they're a stark warning about the dangerous dance between the monarchy and the press. The royal Rota system, that long-standing invisible contract between journalists and the palace, has become a pressure cooker of tension, brewing resentment, and exposing internal fractures. With each sensationalized headline, each invasive story, the monarchy's carefully curated image gets chipped away, revealing a more vulnerable human institution struggling to maintain relevance in a rapidly changing world. The boomerang of media manipulation is coming back, and this time, it might just knock the crown right off. Royal reckoning charting a new course for the monarchy. Just like a boomerang of public perception, the royal family has a chance to redirect its trajectory, and Scobie's insights are like a strategic GPS for navigating the treacherous media landscape. Imagine cutting the umbilical cord to the toxic royal Rota, that age-old system where access and narrative control have long been a twisted dance of power and manipulation. By reducing media access and taking a more proactive stance on their public image, the royals could fundamentally transform how they're perceived, not as passive subjects of tabloid gossip, but as active architects of their own story. It's about flipping the script, creating a narrative that serves the institution and the British public, rather than perpetuating outdated systems of scrutiny and sensationalism. Scobie suggests this isn't just about protection, but evolution, a modern approach that respects the humanity of those in the spotlight, while maintaining the dignity and relevance of the monarchy in a rapidly changing world.